This is the Montana film, projected exactly as it was photographed. The objects are moving against a 25 to 28 mile an hour wind. This is the film in double frame or slow motion. A slight bounce in the movement of the objects as well as the tower is perceptible. This is due to the handheld camera. The film, analyzed frame by frame, shows the movement of the objects to be horizontal and steady.
We will now vary the action and size of the objects and also stop the action from time to time for your study. We have just made a jump cut in the film to an enlarged size and reversed the action. You are now seeing the objects exactly as they were photographed, but from a closer perspective. Analysis reveals that the objects are not balloons, nor any kind of known aircraft. The images are very different from those produced by any kind of birds at any distance. The shape, brightness, speed, rectilinear path, steady motion, and separation rule out various forms of optical atmospheric mirages or cloud reflections. Comprehensive analysis has eliminated meteors and other known natural phenomena. The possibility of airplane reflection has been carefully studied and ruled out.
This is the Utah film as it was originally photographed.
The image structure and maneuvers definitely eliminate any kind of known aircraft.
This is where Chief Photographer Newhouse, in his excitement, changed exposure. He believed that by changing density and giving the film more contrast, he could clarify the objects. The single object that reversed its course. The bounce is due to handheld camera. Now we study the action of one section of the film. We stop the action. We move in.
Within a 5-mile range, aircraft could be determined. In excess of 5 miles, the speeds are greater than aircraft can achieve, except in straight-line speed runs. The movement here follows an elliptical or circular pattern. Microscopic examination reveals that the objects are well focused. Their size varies from 1/6 to 1/10 the size of the moon, as it appears to the naked eye. Their form is circular and sometimes elliptical. This fits the commonly used flying saucer description.
Observe the object in the upper left corner. We move in to study the action. The object upper left will go out of frame on widescreen projection. Observe the motion of the two objects upper right as we rock them back and forth. Now we move over and up on the frame to make a closer study of the object in the upper left corner.
Examine this object closely. Compare it with those objects you saw in the Montana film. These films were taken approximately 2 years apart, hundreds of miles apart.
We drop back to the original perspective and resume. Now the section of the film where photographer Newhouse changed exposure.
Weather conditions, together with the persistence and motion of the formations, eliminate the possibility of atmospheric mirages. Photogrammetric experiments have shown that the images cannot be associated with any kind of birds at any distance.
Stop. Now forward again. Stop. We we drop back to original perspective. Now, once again, and for the last time, the Utah film.
The objects cannot be associated with any known balloon observations.
For the last time, the Montana film.
The 1950s, an idyllic and prosperous time for America. And outside the sleepy town of McMinnville, Oregon, a simple farmer and his wife quietly tended to their crops, fed their animals, and photographed alien spaceships.
I looked up and saw this thing in the sky. Well, it was bronze on the top and silver on the bottom. I would say right around the size of a big parachute, maybe a little bit bigger.
Evelyn Trent was outside tending to the rabbits when she caught a glimpse of this strange object. She yelled for her husband Paul to bring the camera.
And he took the picture of it as it was straight, and then as it tipped, and just, really went. It went fast.
Some relatives saw the pictures, saying, "What's that?" Then they began talking about the story.
The photo was published in the local paper, and people were astonished.
As a photograph, it was probably the first major photograph that showed a mechanical-looking object, not just a bizarre light in the sky. The case got a lot of fame because it was a real sharp, one of the sharpest pictures of a structured object that was ever published for decades.
Doesn't look like an airplane, doesn't look like a helicopter, doesn't look like a bird, doesn't look like a balloon, doesn't look like anything that we would ordinarily see in the sky.
So what was it? Physicist Bruce Maccabee spent nearly 40 years working for the Naval Surface Warfare Center. He also spent those years investigating UFO sightings, including the McMinnville photos.
I examined the Trent photos and, of course, the whole history of the Trent sightings and all our interviews ever since the photos have been taken. In my mind, this is a real case.
Maccabee sees all the evidence he needs right here in black and white.
The clear, very clear shape and description of the dynamics, how the thing flew and so on, make it clear that it was not any flying craft built by human beings.
My name is Graham Bethune. I'm a retired Navy commander, pilot, had a top secret clearance. 50 years ago, February the 10th, 1951, I was flying from Keflavik, Iceland to Argentia, Newfoundland. It was at night, it was dark. About 300 miles outside of Argentia, I saw a glow on the water, like approaching the city at night. As we approached this glow, it turned to a monstrous circle of white lights on the water. We watched this for a while. The lights went out. There was nothing on the water. Next thing we saw was a yellow halo, small, much smaller than whatever it was launched from. And that was 15 miles away, up to our altitude. Because of the trajectory, I disengaged the autopilot, shoved the nose over to try to go under this thing. And at that time, I heard a noise underneath. I thought maybe it hit us. It was actually some of the crew members ducking, and they collided, and a couple of them were injured. Then it appeared over to the right and moved out slowly and flew with us. It was still not at our altitude, but we could see the shape of it. It had a dome. We could see the coronal discharge. I went back aft, let the other pilot, Al Jones, take my seat to see what the passenger's reaction was. Came back to the cockpit, told him not to report anything, simply because what the psychiatrist had said to me, maybe they would lock us up. So basically, the instruments in the cockpit, we had 4 or 5 failures. In the area of magnetic compass, the electromagnetic effect, in area of directional finders, and this type of thing. The craft was tracked by radar in excess of 1,800 miles an hour. It never did get to our altitude. We had 31 passengers, plus the psychiatrist and the crew members that all cited this at different areas. When we landed at Argentia, Newfoundland, we were interrogated by the Air Force, an excellent interrogation, Captain Paulson. When we landed at the Naval Air Test Center here at Patuxent River, we were required by Navy intelligence to make out individual reports. Out of the National Archives, I have the 18-page official Navy and Air Force report. I've made up a report to straighten out all the truth. There's a stack of books out there this high that have written all of this up. So the truth is here. I will testify under oath before Congress that everything that I have said is true.
In late August, early September 1951, a historical and spectacular series of sightings of multiple formations of nocturnal lights occurred in the skies over northwestern Texas. The Lubbock Lights, as they are known, specifically refer to the appearance of 18 to 20 bright objects proceeding in a V formation over Lubbock, as documented by these photos taken by a college student on the evening of August 30th. During the preceding days, strange lights were spotted in the Lubbock area. On the night of August 25th, a similar aerial luminous display was witnessed by 3 Texas Tech professors, geologist W.I. Robinson, chemical engineer A.G. Orberg, and Professor W.L. Ducker, head of the Department of Petroleum Engineering. The 3 saw at least 30 lights crossing at a very high speed over the dark sky. More sightings were reported the following days. Then around midnight on August 30th, a Texas Tech freshman, 18-year-old Carl Hart Jr., observed a perfect V or boomerang-shaped formation of lights over his parents' house. He grabbed his Kodak 35mm camera and snapped these photos of the lights before they disappeared. An interesting occurrence in the pictures is the presence of a much larger and almost triangular-shaped light, which some have speculated could be a mothership overseeing the formation. Once developed, Hart took the pictures to the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, where the editor Jay Harris paid him $10 for the entire set. When the pictures appeared in Life magazine, they got the attention of the Air Force. Although Captain Edward J. Ruppelt of Project Blue Book found no evidence of a fake, he concluded that the 3 professors saw a flock of birds. Several years later, the Air Force conclusion was still migratory birds. Ground Saucer Watch, a civilian UFO research organization, concluded instead that the lights caught on film by Hart were definitely not birds.
Perhaps the most important sighting of all time was the so-called Washington merry-go-round that occurred in late July 1952. It seems to have been a whole set of anomalous objects that appeared over secure airspace in the Capitol, over all of the famous important buildings that paced craft around Washington National Airport, that was seen by a variety of radars at the time.
At 11:40 p.m. on Saturday, July 19, 1952, an air traffic controller at Washington National Airport spotted 7 blips in a corner of the radar scope. They were moving at 100 miles per hour and were heading for the Capitol. No aircraft were known to be in the area. Jet interceptors were scrambled to investigate the UFOs, but within moments, the radar blips had disappeared. When the jets landed, the UFOs returned.
That sighting has never been adequately explained. Because it happened in Washington, D.C., it alerted everybody right on up to the President of the United States and caused a national press conference by the Chief of Intelligence of the Air Force to try to calm everybody down.
At his press conference, General Sanford, Air Force Intelligence Director, confirmed that the objects were not secret American weapons and reiterated the Air Force's obligation to investigate the UFOs.
We have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate to any conceivable threat to the United States.
Well, this was one ordinary day. I was waiting for my husband to come home from work, and my 2 sons went to Seifert to school, and I was getting changed, and I heard this terrific noise. It was just like a giant cauldron of water being poured onto a fire, a shh sort of noise, you know. And my first reaction was, oh, the children. I thought maybe a plane was crashing or something like that. And I slipped my jumper on and went outside to find my 2 sons lying flat on the ground in the garden in front of the house, shouting, "Mummy, Mummy, there's a flying saucer." Well, naturally, I just said, "Come on, don't be stupid. Come in the house." But felt sort of a strange sensation. Wended my way up the side of the house to where we had a pump, where we used to get all our water from, and automatically looked up to see this, all I can describe, this huge Mexican hat. It was stationary, this thing, and it was bright silver in color, and it had a dome. a dome. It was tilted to sort of, I could see the occupants in it.
You saw people in it?
I saw people in it. There were 2 people in there. These people were beautiful people. That's the only way I can describe them. They had long golden hair, like a pageboy bob, just like the old kings. You used to see photographs of the old kings. And the colour of their hair was golden. Now, I was really...
What were they dressed in?
They had a sort of a polo neck jumper affair, like a ski top suit, in pale blue. Now, these people weren't sat one behind the other. They were sat together, but this, whatever it was tilted so that I could see them and they could see me.
Were you looking at them through windows, through portholes? Or
no, not portholes. It was just sort of like a cockpit, I suppose, that had this perspex or glass or whatever it was. They could see me anyway, and I could see them. And they had beautiful faces. I shall never forget their faces as long as I live. Their foreheads seemed to be a bit larger than, you know, the bottom of their faces as normal people you would expect to see. But maybe this was just whatever they had round their heads, which was like a transparent fishbowl. And they just looked. And I was absolutely paralytic with fear. I couldn't move, although my mind was ticking over. And they looked so sympathetic that I was just mesmerized for what seemed to be, ages, but it could have only been seconds. And I turned to sort of look down at the boys, was unaware that they were with me because I was so absorbed. And the next thing, I looked up and it was gone.
How low had it been?
It had been the height, I couldn't tell you. But the house that you've seen, it was just on top of the roof. It was hovering on top of the roof.
How big was it compared with the size of the house?
It swallowed the whole circumference of the roof. I couldn't see. The roof was completely blotted out. The chimneys I couldn't see. All I could see was this massive object that I described as like a Mexican hat without the bubbles.
And then it flew away sideways or upwards?
No, I didn't see. I just looked up and it had gone. But I assume it went straight up, because for a short while after in the sky I looked around and I said to my 2 boys, "Where can you see anything? Can you see anything?" And they said, "There it is, Mum," and they pointed up, and I watched it. It was just like a little cotton reel in the sky, and it circled us 3 times. It went round 3 times, and then it just shut off, and that was it. When I started to analyze myself afterwards, I feared that I might have had an hallucination, but then I knew I hadn't had, because my sons were so sure about what they'd seen and what I'd seen. And it went through my mind that it was a secret weapon from Russia, and then I thought, well, it can't be that, because if they had something like that, they wouldn't need to fear anybody or anything.
Were you scared by it? Did you run indoors?
Oh, I was petrified. I couldn't move. I couldn't move a muscle. I was paralyzed with fear. But now I wouldn't be. Because now, when I look back, you know, I think, what an amazing thing to have happened, and for me to have seen it.
And when your husband came home, where were you?
Well, when my husband came home from the office, I was locked in the house with my children, under a big kitchen table that we were using.
Under the table?
Under the table, yes. It's funny now when I look back. You know, it sounds absolutely ridiculous, but this is the truth. This happened. And that's it. We were ridiculed. It was very embarrassing at the time, and people, they possibly thought, oh, she's a nutter. But, you know, who cares? This is something that's happened to me, and I'm a practically minded person, and that's it.
Would you believe that an angel lived at the Pentagon? What if there was proof, photographic proof taken by a former Air Force photographer, and a statement from a Navy man who worked for Project Blue Book? Hi, my name is Craig Campobasso, and I've worked behind the scenes in movies and television for over 30 years. I am the filmmaker behind bringing this book to the screen. Stranger at the Pentagon. Harley Byrd, nephew of Admiral Richard E. Byrd, was an employee of the branch of the United States Air Force called Project Blue Book. Started in 1952, it studied UFOs and extraterrestrial life. Mr. Byrd confirms the arrival of the extraterrestrial in the book's foreword. In mid-March 1957, we received an urgent message from the Alexandria Police Department. The message indicated that 2 of their on-duty police officers had picked up an alien who had landed some 14 miles south of Pentagon Boulevard, and the occupant was transported to the Pentagon to meet with the Undersecretary of Defense, and then was shuttled underground to meet with President Eisenhower and Vice President Richard Nixon. The meeting lasted for nearly an hour, and then the alien visitor was put on VIP status and was shuttled back to the Pentagon, where he spent the night in the Army reception office. The alien's name was Valiant Thor. Harley Byrd also said that Valiant Thor was labeled the space emissary by the Department of Defense, and that the landing of Valiant Thor is perhaps the first documented landing of a human-type alien by military officials. Valiant Thor lived at the Pentagon from March 16, 1957 through March 16, 1960. He came with a divine design for mankind and asked President Eisenhower to implement it throughout the United States, then the world. In December 1959, knowing his presence on Earth was shrouded in government secrecy, Valiant Thor contacted Nancy Warren, a high-level clearance secretary at the Pentagon, who in turn contacted Dr. Frank Stranges, who then met with Valiant Thor. Their friendship lasted until Dr. Frank's death in November of 2008. Dr. Frank published Stranger at the Pentagon in 1967. It has been a UFO classic ever since. I met Dr. Frank in 2002 and was already a fan of his book. I had the sincere privilege of sitting with him for many years while writing the screenplay to Stranger at the Pentagon. I want to personally thank you for watching. Let's all support Valiant Thor and his mission to assist mankind, and also honor Dr. Frank's legacy. It's time for the light to be brought back into this world. So, I hope to see you all on board Victor 1 in the movies. Now, here's a short clip of Dr. Frank talking about his first meeting with Valiant Thor on the program Let's Talk Paranormal with host Tracy Austin.
Welcome to another Let's Talk Paranormal, and boy do we have a show for you today. Every single one of us has some kind of a story to share. But for my special studio guest today, Dr. Frank Stranges, he has a rather unique story to tell, because during the 1950s, he claims to have met a man from Venus. Yes, you heard me correctly, a man from Venus named Val Thor. And guess what? It's all documented in this book, Stranger at the Pentagon. And in it, Dr. Frank tells us exactly who Val Thor is, why he's here, and there's even photographs to prove his existence. Dr. Frank, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Tracy.
This really is a real-life day the Earth stood still, isn't it?
Yes, plus. And here, coming toward me with his right hand outstretched, the man whose picture I've been carrying around with me for over a year.
Wow.
He said, "Hello, Frank, how are you?" And I thought, how in the Sam Hill does he know my name? And he knew from that time forward, the moment I touched his fingers, his skin was as soft as a baby.
Right.
And I did turn his hand over. He had no fingerprints on either hand, as bald as a peeled boiled egg. And I questioned him on that later, which he told me. And he asked me questions, just a few questions, but I asked him more questions. And he told me more about my own life than my parents and grandparents put together, which I verified later on.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "What is your name?" He said, "Valiant Thor."
There's something special about Val that, you know, you've already mentioned about having no fingerprints.
Yes.
He has no navel.
No, he has no navel and he has no fingerprints. This is why I believe he falls in the category of a created being, just like an angelic being.
Mm-hmm.
And he's unique in his way, believe you me.
Mm-hmm.
And the other members of his crew and the members of his staff, they all have navels.
Right. But being a created being, of course, he wouldn't.
But they don't have any fingerprints either.
Right.
Unique in that manner.
Wow. Let's take a look at the next picture. and see what we have.
This is Commander Valiant Thor. That's exactly what he looked like when the photo was taken by Algid Roberts some years before, and that's exactly what he looks like today. He hasn't changed one iota.
Val, just getting back to Val, where is he today?
Valiant Thor today is on board Victor 1, his spacecraft, not too far from the waterline of Lake Mead, Nevada, not too far from Las Vegas. He's there with his entire complement.
Right. And I believe that in your book you have a map
of
where where Lake Mead is.
The area, yes.
Right.
We also have a sketch of the interior of the ship.
Right. And is the ship underneath the waterbed? Is it on
It's
top?
right on the shoreline. Now, it's surrounded by a force field, and the only way you could possibly find that ship is if you look for a row of a circle of dead insects, but the wind would probably drive them away by the time you got there.
Right. So is there a depression there, sort of like a crop circle depression? Or?
You won't see it.
You wouldn't see it?
No, because it's heavy gravel.
Wow. Well, Dr. Frank, I have to thank you for coming on the show today.
My pleasure.
There have been still so many questions that we haven't been able to ask you today, but hopefully you'll come back.
I most certainly will.
And we'll ask you more.
Major Donald Kehoe is the director of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. As head of this private group interested in flying saucers, he's repeatedly attacked the United States Air Force and others for claiming that flying saucers are apparently flights of fancy and not flights by Martians or men from the moon. Independent surveys show that millions of Americans do share his belief in these celestial saucers. Major Kehoe, first of all, let me ask you this. Most people in the United States, in spite of the fact that I say that millions do believe, I think you will agree that most people in the United States don't believe in flying saucers from outer space. They probably hold the view of columnist Bob Considine, who wrote that flying saucers are products of, for the most part, quote, pranksters, half-wits, cranks, publicity hounds, fanatics in general, and screwballs, end quote. How do you feel about Mr. Considine's charge?
Well, I know where he got the story. He got it from Colonel Watson out at the Air Technical Intelligence Center in Dayton. In fact, the colonel went even a little farther, and he said behind every sighting was an idiot, a crackpot, a religious fanatic. That included a lot of high-ranking Air Force pilots, incidentally, and many airline captains, people who were qualified to see these things. But he's just following out an Air Force policy.
Well, now, you're not suggesting that Bob Considine is in the pay of the Air Force. He's an independent newsman with a considerable reputation.
I mean the colonel. No, I have every respect for Bob Considine.
In spite of the fact that he suggests that pranksters, half-wits, and screwballs are responsible for the stories about flying saucers.
Well, I wish I could show him any time a list of about 800 witnesses, some of the big names in aviation, including up to the rank of colonel in the Air Force. They're still flying, and they're still carrying passengers. They've never been grounded. They're still guiding airliners in, the radar men are, night after night in bad weather. If they're screwballs and incompetents, why are they still on the job? That we would accept as absolutely verified.
All right, now, let's go at it from another point of view, if I may, the Air Force point of view. They agree, undoubtedly, objects have been seen in the sky. But the Air Force has said time and time again, and this is a quote from Richard Horner, Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Research and Development. All but a small percentage of these reports of unidentified flying objects have been definitely attributed to natural phenomena that are neither mysterious nor dire, end quote. Weather balloons, mirages, ordinary sky phenomena like meteors, airplanes themselves. What about that?
I'll answer that, but I'd like to make several points doing it. In 1947, the Air Technical Intelligence Center at Dayton, the top Air Force intelligence men and scientists under contract, sent a secret document to the commanding general of the Air Force saying that whatever these things were, they were real. In 1948, ATIC, the same group, sent a top-secret estimate to the commanding general, Hoyt Vandenberg, said these were interplanetary space. In 1952, there was an intelligence analysis of the maneuvers of these things, as seen by radar, triangulation, radar photographs, and in 53, the Central Intelligence Agency and the Air Force had a special panel of scientists meet at the Pentagon to tell them what to do. And after they got through, this group said, you don't have proof that these things exist, not scientific proof, but you have a very strong circumstantial case. We suggest you quadruple the investigation, set up special observation posts, and in the meantime, release everything you've got to the American people. Now, you've got 4 documents there that they've been sitting on all this time. Now, and they have been spending a lot of money investigating flying saucers. If they don't exist, why the money? Why did the intelligence teams rush out every time there's a sighting?
Now then, you have mentioned 4 documents that you claim exist. We've heard in the past that you have claimed that these documents existed. We've seen your literature in which you talk about the existence of those documents. So we spoke with the Air Technical Intelligence Center at the Pentagon earlier this week, and this is what we were told officially by them. 3 of the 4 documents Major Kehoe refers to simply do not exist. The 4th document does exist. You can have a copy of it, Mr. Wallace, and you can see that it doesn't say what Major Kehoe claims it says. We have a copy of it, and I quote to you from the copy. The Air Force document says just this. The panel recommends that the national security agencies take immediate steps to strip the UFOs of the special status they have been given and the aura of mystery they have unfortunately acquired. We suggest an integrated program designed to reassure the public of the total lack of evidence of inimical forces behind the phenomena. And again, as I point out, Secretary Horner says it simply ain't so. Now, why? The point really at issue here, it would seem, Major Kehoe, is this. Why do you believe that the Air Force says that nothing is going on? Why do you believe that it's a fairly serious charge that
I know
you make.
it is.
You make the charge that the United States government is withholding from the people of the United States certain very important information. Why? What would their motive be for withholding that kind of information from us?
Well, I'll answer that, but I would also like to show you some proof that they are withholding it. The reason that was given to me when they were working with me back in 52 and 53 was, first, that they were afraid of hysteria. Remember the Orson Welles show way years back when he scared people into the hills with the idea of invading Martians? Then they were also afraid that it would upset organized religion. That was a smaller factor, but there was some fear of it. Later, they were afraid that these accidents, when interceptors had chased these things and had been lost or had crashed, might be considered proof of hostility. Now, I would never have put my name on anything if it were a matter of personal opinion. I've talked to and read the reports of hundreds of pilots and radar men and guided missile trackers who've seen these things, and some of them are very important names. The Air Force says they have this down to 1.9%, but you'll notice the word current in there. They mean we are currently explaining. Now, I have in my possession a copy of Special Report 14, which is their Bible on this. In the back, it has a table showing that 3,201 cases they examined, 19.5% were unsolved, and they admit they still are unsolved. You add up what they've had since then, it makes over 12% of the report.
Newspapers talked about it. People wanted to know. But nobody could penetrate the mystery. What was going on? Strange flying machines were ploughing the skies of Italy. It was the 50s. Some people took incredible photos. Others were frightened and shouted, "They're here! They're among us!" While still others believed the aliens had come to help. But who were they? Where were they from? Above all, what did they want? Many knew but kept quiet. A mystery that has remained as such for decades. A secret now revealed. Friendship. The incredible story of mass contact between humans and extraterrestrials. Until recently, the phenomenon of contactism, or the deliberate encounter repeated over time between men and evolved extraterrestrial entities, was believed to involve only a few chosen individuals or contactees. Many of them went down in history. George Adamski, Howard Menger, Eugenio Siragusa, just to name a few. All of them faithfully abided by this cliché. But in 2007, something happened that would change the cards on the table. Stefano Breccia, an engineer from Marche living in Abruzzo, published some startling papers that seemed to reveal the story of repeated direct encounters between more than 100 people and extraterrestrial beings living in numerous secret bases on our planet. The main figure of the event told by Breccia is the writer Bruno Sammachicha. The case is said to have taken place mainly in and around Pescara. It would all begin in 1956 and would last for many years. The film clips and photographs that have emerged so far are of considerable interest, but even more extraordinary are the testimonies of the individuals involved. Everyone called this story friendship, and that is the name that has come down to us today. Thanks to Stefano Breccia's courage, one of the most awe-inspiring sagas in ufology has come to light. It wasn't an easy decision to decide to make it known.
It all started from an idea by Bruno Sammachicha. He'd been thinking about writing down his experiences and then asked me to be the one to do it, and so I was at his house for a month to record his stories. Then I put everything together.
Besides granting his dear friend's wishes, Breccia had set himself another objective.
One reason is to hope that it might work as bait to encourage other people in the group to come forward.
Gaspare De Lama and his wife Mirella are among those still alive today who were involved in the friendship events and who accepted Breccia's invitation to come forward. They now live on the shores of Lake Como. Gaspare admired Stefano's courage to expose himself so directly, despite being a well-known figure in science and academia.
He had no hesitation about exposing himself, and I admired him for that. And so coming out and talking about my experience becomes easy for me, because it gives me great joy. The joy of being able to tell people something that can help them understand more, or make their doubts grow or disappear, or strengthen their belief.
Gaspare De Lama became a fan of ufology in the late 40s and, together with his wife, sought a path to greater awareness. Even Gaspare's mother took part in the events.
Gaspare, his mother Zita, and I had finally achieved our goal, which was to get to know them. We were hoping for an experience with teachers who could help us improve.
In the friendship story, Samachicha called the beings by the name of W56. They weren't a single race, but a group of extraterrestrial beings coming from different parts of the universe. Although they looked like humans, there were considerable differences in height, which ranged from 1 to 6 meters. The first encounter took place in April 1956. Bruno Samachicha was there, along with his two friends, Giancarlo and Giulio.
Bruno said that an old friend had given him this parchment because Bruno collected antiques, and while looking at it, they noticed it was a map of the castle above Ascoli Piceno at Roccapiglia. It seemed to be a kind of treasure map, so they decided to go and take a look at the area. They went there more than once without ever finding anything in particular, until one night when they came across these people. At a certain point, these two came out from a path that runs around the castle, introduced themselves and started to talk. One of them was particularly short, about 1 meter in height, and the other extremely tall, 2.5 meters, something like that. As for the rest, they looked like normal people.
But what happened in that encounter? According to the eyewitnesses, the two aliens spoke perfect Italian. The thing that immediately struck them was the strong sense of love that emanated from these beings. The information they gave to Bruno, Giancarlo, and Giulio was awesome, to say the least. They said that Earth had been created for a positive purpose and that man was turning everything into evil. That the morality level of humans was much lower than their own. They explained that this is a very critical moment in human history. Atomic weapons are capable of destroying the planet in a matter of minutes, a tremendous risk that could come to pass because of our low moral sense. Their task was to ensure that the situation didn't get out of hand. They said they weren't here to conquer, as there was nothing to conquer. That everything stemmed from the need for love and respect, and that everything should be done in accordance. They knew Earth's history, philosophies, and religions perfectly. They said they'd already been on Earth for many centuries, living at secret bases in various places on the planet. They preferred not to reveal themselves publicly because people weren't ready for the contact. They expected a positive return from their activity. Their goodness and their truth would be stronger than human doubts. When they left, it was almost 3 in the morning. The extraordinary experience of friendship began at that very moment. The meetings between Bruno, Giancarlo, Giulio, and the W56, also known as the Friends, continued for several months. During frequent long walks on the beach in Pescara, they gave the humans a good deal of other information. Dimpietro was the name of the captain of the extraterrestrial group operating in Italy. Sigir, Sigis, Itao, Kenio, Sinas, Saju, Meradir, Romulus are some of the names that became common within friendship. They were invented by the humans because the W56 had a different concept for names. One of the most impressive facts regarded their bases. They said they had a number of them scattered around Italy and the world. Their most important European base was right in Italy, and one of the entrances was in fact at Roccapiglia.
The main one was the enormous base at the depths of the Adriatic, almost in contact with the continental shelf, which roughly ranged from Ortona to Rimini as the expanse of its longitude, and in latitude went from the middle of the Adriatic to the Apennines, with an upper limit of 300 meters. So vast that it was affected by normal weather, so at times it also rained inside. Then they had many smaller bases, closer to the surface. There was one in Pineto, one in Ascoli, 3 around Pescara, one near Como, one in the Milan area, and so on. Many of them were genuine centers of support.
But the aliens also explained how they built their bases. In the stories told by Bruno, Giancarlo and Giulio, you're immediately aware of the huge gap in scientific and technological development between humans and the Friends.
They weren't built by digging, but through a particular mechanism. They were able to compress material laterally. The soil would thicken into what would later become the walls of the base, and then the outer structure was formed by extremely dense and therefore extremely strong material. The funny thing was that it was very unstable, but it always had to be kept standing. All you had to do was flip a switch and everything returned to the initial state. So, for them to open and close a base was a very commonplace operation.
The same system was used to create the entry corridors.
Even the bases closer to the surface didn't have stable entrances. When they had to enter, they opened a corridor and then closed it again.
Aside from the facts related to friendship, the presence of secret extraterrestrial bases on our planet is a subject that scholars have long been aware of. Just as there have been numerous cases of contact throughout the world, like the one the American policeman named Herbert Schirmer described, which occurred in Ashland, Nebraska on December 3rd, 1967.
The experience took place in the United States to the policeman Schirmer, who had a close encounter of the third kind with UFO entities and was allowed on board one of these UFOs. In the course of this encounter with these beings, they told him several things. He would be told that the pilots of UFOs on Earth have different bases of support, and they are both underground and below the seas.
In the case of friendship, Bruno Sammarchichia was the leader, the main reference point.
The story of the W-56 had started with him. He knew the most since he'd been in the bases, had met them personally, was telepathic, was the one who held the strings, the one who decided. Not that he was, I'm the boss. The word boss isn't nice, but we saw him as number one.
The relationship that was established between the W-56 and the friendship group was not one way. Very soon, the friends started asking for help.
At the most prosaic level, they asked for essentially logistical assistance. Then they requested industrial quantities of fruit. Then they needed metals in industrial quantities as usual, but also strange minerals like strontium and barium nitrate, which were very difficult to find since back then they served no useful purpose at all. Today it has applications in telecameras, circuits like that, but in those days we had absolutely no idea what it might be used for.
To unload the cargo from the trucks, including fruit, the W-56 used teleporting.
They proved they could teleport anything, even people, without any particular problem. They took the whole load of fruit and teleported it, which means that the operation only lasted a few seconds.
Of course, all this meant that no outsider could watch the unloading. This often forced Bruno and Giancarlo to invent excuses so the truck drivers arriving with a load wouldn't become suspicious. They usually explained that a team of professional workers would be coming soon to transfer the goods by other means. So, while Bruno invited the driver to some nearby bar to wait for the phantom workers, Giancarlo stood watch over the truck. Obviously, the places where they met were chosen in advance. The unloading operation lasted just a few seconds, so when Bruno and the truck driver came back, it was already over. The truck driver was always impressed by the speed and cleanliness of the work. Buying such large quantities and so many varieties of materials was very expensive. Sometimes it was the friends who paid part of the cost, or all of it, maybe in their usual way. But most of the time it wasn't like that, which created more than a few problems.
Essentially, the vast majority of the expenses were paid by Bruno. In other words, he took the trouble of paying, the others took part if and when they could.
Throughout this story, definitely out of the ordinary, it seems even more absurd that despite their astonishing technological capabilities, the W-56 needed help to get food or other materials. Not to mention the money that materialized out of nowhere.
Of course, they could get whatever they wanted without the slightest problem. As I said, their technology was advanced. In my opinion, putting on this little show served to keep the sense of cohesion tight.
In fact, the friends explained that to be able to operate among us, humans had to express their goodwill in a concrete way too. They said, "Help us to help you." Lots of people who were part of the friendship story saw W-56 flying saucers. These sightings were almost always by appointment. The W-56 indicated the place, date and time, so the humans were able to get organized with film equipment. Sometimes the photos were also published. The series of a flying saucer over Milan, photographed by Gaspare Dell'Ama, ended up in Domenica del Corriere in the second issue of April 1962. The sighting had taken place at the end of February of the same year. The eyewitnesses were Gaspare Dell'Ama, Bruno Samaciccia and journalist Bruno Ghibaudi, at the time author of numerous articles on UFOs, and one of the first journalists to seriously address the issue.
When we were on my balcony in Piazza Giulio Cesare in Milan, when that saucer was photographed, that's why he later wrote the article in the Domenica del Corriere. Besides Bruno, he was present too.
Obviously, only now, after the revelations of Professor Breccia and Gaspare Dell'Ama, can we know what really revolved around that seemingly chance occurrence. But how much weight should we give to these claims? Gaspare still remembers one of the sightings perfectly. It happened in the countryside of Treno near Milan. There are still excellent quality photos and a film clip, more deteriorated because of the decades that have passed. The W-56 asked Gaspare himself to choose the place.
I went back to Bruno and said, "That's the place I chose." And then he told me, "Go buy some film, put it in the camera." And I said, "But no, you put it in." No, you have to do everything." I said, "Okay." I put the film in the camera and filmed for a good 2 minutes. He wanted me to take the film out of the camera. I put it in my pocket and took it to Ferrania, which was then in Via Mattiotti, to have it developed. When I went to get it, I took it home and saw the film clip of this beautiful flying saucer that was going up and down almost to the ground.
On top of the saucer, you see a dark area, which the W-56 explained was a particular effect of condensation caused by the energy of the flying saucer. some of the photos of the series taken in the Treno countryside were lost, but those that remain would provide evidence of the incredible sighting experienced by Gaspare de Lama and Bruno Sammachicha. While returning to Milan, the saucer followed them for a stretch, and Sammachicha took one more shot, the last of the 12 exposures on the roll.
Bruno took a photo of the same flying saucer, which had apparently reappeared there to follow us or to give us a last farewell.
The particular phenomenon of condensation does not appear in this shot. This important series of documents was analyzed to evaluate any possible falsification. Back then, digital technologies didn't exist, so it was very difficult to produce high-quality forgeries.
I accurately and specifically analyzed the photographic material concerning the friendship case. I didn't find any evidence of forgery, such as a small-scale model suspended by cables, superimposed images, processing with 3D graphics.
From the images of the analyses that were made, I can confirm that the object was quite large. We're talking roughly 4 to 5 meters around, and this also agrees with the testimonies of the people I spoke with, and the object is precisely inserted into this context of lights, shadows. Therefore, it is perfectly placed in its environmental context.
As part of the friendship case, an enormous amount of photographic material and film clips about flying saucers was produced. Much has been distributed indiscriminately, much has been lost, and even stolen, and much more is still locked in the drawers of other unknown participants who don't want to make themselves known. However, there's enough material available to give us an idea of just how incredible the events would have been. All the material that is known to date is thanks to Gaspare de Lama and Stefano Breccia.
In the friendship case, there were literally hundreds of photos, videos, audio recordings, and that's about it, since technology ended there at the time.
Over time, friendship would involve other people who took part in this incredible experience in various ways. Everybody had the opportunity to see the phenomena, and many had the chance to personally meet the W56. The number and kinds of individuals involved, in Italy alone, would be considerable.
I have a file where there are the names of, I think, 120 people who were involved in this story in some way. Those are the people I'm aware of, but who knows how many others there are that I don't know about. The people involved in friendship came from all walks of life. There was a cross-section of normal society. Friendship was also active in other countries, in France, Switzerland, Germany, particularly in Germany, but also in Siberia, in Argentina, and who knows how many other places, in Australia.
As we've seen, teleportation was one of the most impressive technological capabilities the Friends had. This system was used to materialize and dematerialize objects of various sorts, and even slips of paper with the written answers to questions asked by those who were present at the meetings.
Their technology is infinite. There were so many things I saw. The ones I remember the most were the teleports. Their film reels, or even, sometimes, written notes or film clips of flying saucers that we would then watch just came from above. They materialized in mid-air in the room. Sometimes they came from the floor and tapped me under the chair. Sometimes I saw them materialize in the air.
Along with teleportation, some of the most frequent phenomena were communications between the Friends and the humans through normal radios. This was also done their way.
Their technology was virtually indistinguishable from magic. For example, if I took two identical radios tuned into the same frequency and put them side by side awaiting their message could be heard on one radio while the other radio continued its normal broadcast as if nothing was happening. So there was obviously insane amounts of energy involved and directivity just as crazy.
So I bought myself one of those transistor radios. Bruno told me to put it there on the cabinet. In 5 minutes, they'll prepare it for you. In fact, after 5 minutes, there was a big crack. A sort of greenish flame came out, and Bruno said, "There, now it's ready." And they immediately greeted me through the radio. Sigir, and I could also change the frequencies. The broadcast continued.
Some of these communications were also recorded with the reel-to-reel devices existing then. Gaspare still owns some of the tapes. For the first time after so many years, the voice of the W56 is made public.
Cari amici, cari figlioli, siate certi di noi, poiché nessuno tra noi vacillerà. Voi siate uniti, uniti, uniti e sopportate le vostre debolezze reciproche, lottando e migliorando come uomini e come nostri cari amici. Il nostro mondo per voi cari non è facile a capire. Questo è naturale, ma con l'affetto e la fiducia potrete ugualmente stare vicino ai nostri cuori aperti a voi e comprenderci di più. Un abbraccio fatto di caldo affetto e di pura amicizia dal vostro Sigir.
Radios weren't the only communication tools used. Sometimes the friends would also insert themselves into normal television programs.
I remember once there was a film, and it was interrupted and their saucers were seen flying, while in the background their voices, maybe only greeting us that time.
A fourth witness of the extraordinary events of friendship who accepted Breccia's invitation to speak is the professor of design Paolo Di Girolamo. His experience was very brief. He met the friendship group only a couple of times. Always a ufology enthusiast, Di Girolamo knew Consul Alberto Perego and journalist Bruno Ghibaldi personally, and it was precisely the latter to put him in touch with Bruno Samaciccia in Pescara. Paolo had with him a letter he'd written for the W56.
And he welcomed me into a kind of living room, so to speak. I enter, I lay this letter on the console, and I sit down on the sofa. At one point, Bruno Samaciccia says, "We should be getting some news, let's see." He takes this radio and turns it on. The radio was playing music, and then we hear a piercing whistle. Really a very loud hissing sound. I hear Sigir here. "Hello, Paolo. Be honest with us all. Be honest with us all. Be honest with us all." 3 times. Then another voice says, "Let's get the goods." Now, the goods, in my opinion, had to be a big parcel Samaciccia had taken, all lined in black and placed on top of the television set. A very loud crackle, a real blinding purple flash, just like that, and then there was nothing.
After this event, which leaves Paolo speechless, the group goes out into the street. And when they come back inside, Paolo realizes that his letter, which he'd left on the table, was gone. For a moment, they talk about who might have taken it, but nobody understands. Samachicha's wife also denies touching it. At that point, Bruno urges everyone to go out into the street again.
There wasn't a soul in sight at all. Around midnight, or something like that. At a certain point, I feel something falls on my head. A little piece of paper all folded up. It was a scorched envelope. Open, and it was the letter I'd left on the console.
To make the phenomena possible, or to amplify them, including telepathy, which they made wide use of, the W56 used devices that were called nuclei. They could be placed in objects, in rooms, or even in the bodies of living creatures, including people.
Questi nuclei erano per loro una...
These nuclei were a necessary thing for them. Like if I want to receive a phone call from you, I need to have a phone at my house.
Bruno had a German shepherd named Dick. The friends told Bruno that the dog would play an important role in the contacts and in certain operations that called for the help of the humans. He would become a sort of amplifying antenna. So they asked Samachicha to bring the dog to the seaside. And at their command, which came by telepathy, Dick was made to go into the water. At that point, the friends would treat the dog, placing nuclei under his paws. In fact, Dick was almost always with Bruno. In one of the film clips that have come to light, we see him looking out of the window while Bruno is filming a UFO circling over the palazzos of Milan, where Bruno lived for a while. It isn't the only ufological document made in Milan. One of the more controversial pieces of information that the W56 gave to their human friends concerned a conflict with an artificial race called Weros, but which Samachicha renamed with the term CTR, which was the contraction of the word contraries.
One of the strange things about the friendship stories is the existence of enemies, the famous contraries, the CTR. While the W56 were ethical, these others were materialistic, virtually the opposite of the W56 in every way. They didn't speak of war, but of conflict, and said one reason they were here was to keep the CTR in check.
The friends called them science worshippers, saying the CTR were creatures without scruples. And their greatest fear was that we humans were following the same path the CTR had already covered. For the W56, the feelings of friendship, affection, love and harmony that they were creating between themselves and the human group, just as it is among human beings, were not just defining the quality of relationships.
For them, cohesion, friendship, loyalty, and things like that are not abstract concepts, but rather a living entity that they call Ureda. This living entity is fostered precisely by the sense of loyalty and was contrasted by an alter ego that was called Reda, which was essentially the opposite.
E a loro questa energia serviva come...
And for them, this energy served as a sort of fuel, let's say, a driving force for some of their means of defense, or anyway for their tools.
The defense instruments Gaspare talks about, the friends explained, were also important for the conflict they had with the CTR. They explained that friendship, which Ureda originated from, was so important that if the group hadn't kept the harmony high, or if the group was even dismembered, they themselves would have fallen victims of the CTR, who might well have destroyed their bases. But this wasn't the only reason to be friends. The W-56 said that love, in its most unselfish sense, as well as ethics, respect, and altruism, should guide every thought and every action. They said these values were essential to ensure a safe and healthy evolutionary progress. A lesson that humanity had to put into practice if it wanted to avoid the risk of terrible self-destruction. The mere thought of doing harm was inconceivable to the W-56, and the sense of ethics, morality, pervaded their every action, their every gesture, their every thought. Even their technology, their machines, were consciously impregnated with it. A concept that for us is unimaginable.
They said they were incapable of causing harm to anyone. They said that even their very devices would refuse to harm anyone. Ethics permeated everything about them, to the point that they would refuse. Indeed, they said that if they weren't able to avoid harming someone, then in that case they would self-destruct.
It wasn't by chance that the journalist Bruno Ghibaldi was with De Lama and Sammachicha during the sighting published by Domenica del Corriere. Ghibaldi was extremely involved in friendship and experienced everything there was to be tried, including the personal encounters with the W-56. Stefano Breccia also knew him. He remembers very well how he joined the group.
At the time, Ghibaldi had a program on television about making model aircraft. Giancarlo had seen it by chance, and he liked this person. He asked for Bruno's permission, and Bruno agreed. As a result, Ghibaldi was brought to Milan to meet Bruno, and starting from then also became a part of the circle.
The presence of the journalist was important because he could indirectly publicize a lot of the information that was given by the friends.
He was a journalist who could help the case by writing about it, while we didn't have any connections like this. He had acquaintances in the field of journalism and television that we didn't have.
The pictures that Ghibaldi took of a UFO over Monte Mario in Rome attracted the attention of Cesare Zavattini. The famous filmmaker interviewed him and put the piece in a documentary film entitled The Mysteries of Rome. The words of Ghibaldi emphasized what the W-56 had said was one of their main tasks on our planet: the control of the nuclear armaments belonging to the superpowers, in the fear that man might make the terrible choice of using them, unleashing a total war. In fact, this is one of the key themes of the entire story of worldwide contactism. Adamski, Siragusa, Menja, and many other contactees received the same kind of message from extraterrestrials. And the W-56 actually intervened with their UFOs and their technology, but with previously trained terrestrial operators, to stop a situation that seemed it might lead to something irreparable. The incident occurred in 1967.
So, an operation managed by human beings was launched, which was designed to disable all nuclear warheads in the Soviet Union and in the United States, in the face of a situation that seemed risky, that might degenerate from one minute to the next. There are books written by officers of the US Air Force, by now retired, which tell the story of how their battery of Minuteman missiles had been rendered inactive by flying saucers revolved in the area.
One of the books referred to by engineer Breccia was written by Robert Salas and James Klotz. It contains military documents obtained through the law on the Freedom of Information, the so-called Freedom of Information Act. But there are other clues about the interest these beings had in nuclear weapons. The atomic tests have always been filmed and photographed with special equipment, with technologies that can capture the very first moments of the thermonuclear explosion. In these pictures, we see the explosion in the first few microseconds, when the terrible mushroom cloud hasn't yet formed. In the third snapshot, we note the presence of an Adamskian flying saucer a few meters from the explosion. If authentic, this photo would give us an idea of the incredible technological capabilities of these creatures. Another extremely important person in the history of Italian ufology was Consul Alberto Perego, who wrote as many as 4 books between the 60s and 70s analysing the world scene and pointing out policy choices made by governments that would have been affected by the overt or covert activities of this sort of alien aviation. Many exceptionally clear photos of UFOs appeared in these volumes. Some of them were even identified as being the inside of a cockpit of a flying saucer. Perego cited the dates and locations of the sightings, but never mentioned the name of the authors of the photos. The places were almost always the classic zones where the W-56 and the Friendship were active. Milan, Pescara, Francavilla, Montesilvano. And in fact, the photos were made precisely by the people who were part of Friendship. But we've only learned this today. For Gaspare da Lama, Alberto Perego was of paramount importance. Perego introduced him to the comprehension of the profound implications of the UFO phenomenon and contactism at a time when it was extremely difficult to find material about these issues in Italian.
And then he told me how things were according to him. Naturally, I reeled a bit of the chair because I didn't expect it. He really knew. I mean, he'd understood a lot. He'd understood. A man of great valor, an idealist, a pure man. He, too, was amazing, very cultured.
Perego also announced to Gaspare that he intended to publish a book where he would reveal everything he knew about the presence in our midst of beings from other worlds, a proposal that never materialized, however. Among the correspondence that Gaspare has kept are letters written by Consul Perego himself. In one of these, among other things, he talks about his intention to publish the book, I'll Tell All. Other statements made in this excerpt of the letter are also very interesting.
Dear, I imagine you've guessed my bitter experience of recent years. For the revelation of the new reality, I'd bet on 2 men who have disappeared from the scene, John 23 and Kennedy. As is well known, Kennedy died 5 days before my report went into circulation. As you've seen, everyone keeps quiet or pretends not to know. In 1965, I hope to publish I'll Tell All, but I believe I've already said a good deal. I'm sending you with best wishes, the most affectionate remembrance, Alberto Perego.
But the alleged tasks of these creatures would have been others as well. Another purpose of the presence of the W-56 was to help our evolutionary process, to push us to a higher level of understanding. That's why they had been on our planet for a very long time, and even shared with us some of our suffering in the matter. They also revealed that their real name was Acri. Stefano Breccia has done research on this name, discovering some very interesting aspects.
The word Acri is a plural noun in Sanskrit that means the sages. At that point, I tried to see it in Egyptian, and I discovered that there are 2 very similar words. The first term, Akriu, is the name of these divinities, which usually means the wise people. Then it occurred to me to inquire into other languages. I discovered that in classical Greek, Akri means Akeo, or people in high places. In classical Arabic, Akri means group of friends, or something like that. As a proper noun, the word is fairly common, fairly widespread.
But this wouldn't be the only trace. Years ago, Count Richard Cianfrè gave the Italian contactee Eugenio Saragusa a strange handwritten letter from Voltaire. It was addressed to the legendary Count of Saint-Germain. The text contains enlightening phrases that would fit perfectly into the context of an alleged alien presence in human history.
6th of June, 1761. I am answering your letter of April, Lord, in which the appalling revelations make the old man that I have become the confidant to your most terrible secrets, the day of his death. Thank you, Germaine. Your long road through time will be illuminated by my friendship for you. Even at the time of your revelations about the middle of the 20th century. Because of time, the talking pictures will not be able to be stored in memory. May your wonderful flying machines bring you back to me. Farewell, my friend. Voltaire, Gentleman of the King.
What were the talking pictures that Voltaire refers to? And your wonderful flying machines? What had Voltaire seen? Who was the legendary Count of Saint-Germain really? The epilogue of friendship arrived at the end of the 70s because, unfortunately, the people who revolved around Samachicha failed to deliver on the expectations of the cosmic friends. The group gradually and irreversibly fell apart. The Ureda disappeared and the fears of the W-56 seemed to come true. This dramatic moment coincided with the phenomena of the Adriatic, the great wave of sightings that occurred between October 78 and January 79.
Officially, the story ended when the CTR managed to get the better. The story is quite difficult to believe from many perspectives. According to me, the adventure of 78 was the surprise ending. I mean, these people were probably fed up with Samachicha and company and decided to bow out in a spectacular way. In my opinion, it continued to go on, and I have good evidence of this fact in Italy as well as abroad.
Even if the entire story of friendship seems like an incredible science fiction tale rather than an incident that really happened, despite the great controversy about its authenticity, given what has emerged so far, it's difficult to maintain that it had all been an invention.
Believe it, don't believe it. In any case, we can't help but take into consideration the testimonies of the protagonists and the material that refers to these testimonies.
According to eyewitnesses, the sightings, the teleporting, and all the other impressive phenomena that appeared were not, however, the real reason these beings were on Earth. The friends defined themselves as the precursors of the spirit world. In the end, the real essence, the soul of this relationship, which unfortunately ended up badly because of human shortcomings, is the immense example of love, dedication and respect that they impressed in the heart of the eyewitnesses still living.
L'insegnamento più bello che ho ricevuto tra di loro
The most valuable teachings that I received from among them is this momentum they gave us, and this endeavor, perhaps gone amiss, that they've made to love each other truly, to be close-knit, and to be united. They enriched me. They put me into contact with an almost impossible world full of love.
It was also an exciting experience. Very exciting and magnificent. The feeling that the W-56 transmitted was one of great friendship and love.
There would be much more to say about friendship. Before leaving, the friends promised to come back and created a bond with the few remaining humans with an oath of mutual fidelity. Even today, these people believe that there are indeed special friends that could help us or who, in all probability, have never stopped doing so.